Hey everyone, today we're going to address an issue on this Braava Jet mop that is pretty much an inevitability unless you're using distilled water, and even then I think with the cleaner it will inevitably become an issue, and that is the spray jet becoming clogged. And I'm just going to run this one and we're going to see what we're up against on this particular unit. As my wife had complained, there's nothing coming out of this one. And in fairness, if it's bone dry, it could be a couple of sprays to prime the pump, but that's not what we're seeing here. It's simply not working. And I think running it sporadically, that is to say, running it and then allowing things to dry out and running it and allowing things to dry out is one of the reasons that it calcifies and forms a blockage. But I think we've determined that the pump does try and spray and this one has a blockage, so let's get started. And now I have it conveniently propped up on the dining room table where I shouldn't be working. Opening the top lid, I remove the container that holds the liquid from the unit, and I want to test that by pushing that button on the bottom and make sure liquid comes out, because if there's a blockage there, nothing's going to work. But that one's fine. A blockage there would be highly unexpected, but anything is possible. Clean up my mess now. And at this point, I'm bringing the entire unit to center stage, and what I'm doing is I'm pulling out the rubber seal and the filter. I would urge you first to simply pull out that little filter from the middle to test the filter, but I know I'm taking this one apart, and we can see that that filter is seated inside that rubber gasket. It does pop out separately, and there's no need to remove both if you're just looking at the filter, which is what we're going to do. This filter's a bit cruddy, and it could always benefit from a cleaning because it's a fine membrane, but you want to ask yourself an important question before you open up this entire unit. And that question is, does this filter hold water? Because if it does, that might actually be a problem. It may look clean, but the calcification that forms on this membrane may stop water from going through. So I'm going to add some water to this and watch it pour out the other side. This one is actually fine, but if it's filling up and the water's not coming out the bottom, that could actually be a problem. So you may want to clean the filter before you tear down the entire unit. I'll post a link or one of those skip ahead to chapter things down below if this is your problem, so we can move ahead to the cleaning of this filter. Otherwise, I'll just assume that water could flow through and that's not your problem. So we'll kick things off by holding down the power button till the unit shuts off. Dab this area here with a paper towel to remove any residual cleaning fluid so it doesn't spill out everywhere while I'm working. And then close the lid. I'm showing a close-up here of the spray nozzle just to check for an obstruction. I hear people online sticking toothpicks in the spray nozzle. Don't stick toothpicks in the spray nozzle. So now I'm going to release the pad. And with a Phillips screwdriver, I'm going to loosen these two screws, which holds the battery into place. These screws do not come out and they stay in the battery housing. I just lift up pulling on one of the screws to remove the entire battery unit. We can see there are 4 screws that hold in this front bumper. We're going to loosen those. These screws, again, do not seem to come out, though it is possible they could fall out, so take precaution. As I flip the unit over, making sure none of those screws do fall out, I peel away this cover from those 4 posts very carefully as to not break it from the nozzle and lift up. With the front bumper removed, we can now see the 4 posts that it was connected to, the screws still inside. The unit is then flipped upside down, and we're going to be removing the top cover now, working from the back, starting with these 3 screws. And I'll point out that all these screws are the same size except for one group of screws where specified in the video. Now these screws on the outside and the back, I'll point out that this hole and this hole have no screw in it. These screws are next in between the wheels. We pull them out now. Now there are 5 screws on this cover here. There's the 5th. They are all short screws. We're going to remove these now. Now we can pull this cover off, put it to the side. It exposes our last 2 screws right over here. We'll remove those now. Now carefully flipping over the unit to ensure any screws don't fall out. The front lid is then opened, and using the front lid, the entire cover is lifted off of the assembly. It's still connected with wires, so it's just leaned off to the right hand side as shown. Now I want to make sure that I lean it in such a way as I don't stress any of these cables. There's no sense in trying to repair this unit if I'm going to end up breaking it in the process. And here's the path of the sprayer circuit from the filter through this blue hose, comes around into the pump, out of the pump through this orange hose, makes its way around, and then out the sprayer. Here's the sprayer right here. It's kind of a two-piece system that holds it together by one screw. It kind of floats, but if we remove the screw, we could separate these two pieces and pull the sprayer out the front. So we're going to do that now. And the screw doesn't come out. It's held in place, so it just kind of loosens and allows these two pieces to be separated. So I push them forward, and they split apart, which is fine, because we remember the position of the piece that's coming out. The left side has the thread, the right side has the post. At this point, all that remains is the sprayer and that screw that's held in the fixture here. So I very gently pull to a slight angle the orange hose off of the pump, so I can pull the entire sprayer out of the front. At this point, I'll fill a small bowl with white vinegar. And I want to back out that screw by pushing as I turn, because I don't want that screw going in the vinegar. And the entire nozzle will be submerged in the vinegar. Drop the filter in there too. While those are soaking, I choose to check the blue hose for an obstruction, so I remove it from the pump. And looking at where the filter would sit here, I blow into that hose, and we can quite plainly see that there's no obstruction to be found here. Having tested that, I now return that hose to the bottom of the pump. It's kind of a fiddly exercise to work that silicone hose back onto the pump, but eventually it's fully seated. And we're done. There are guides that the hose is pushed back into, ensuring not to crimp the hose in any way that would obstruct the flow. The second guide is back here as well, and it's pushed down just like so. The longer, flatter portion of this seal, as we see here, faces downward. We're going to put this seal back on the plastic piece, working it around the plastic piece. I'm doing it with one hand, probably easier with two, so I'll use two hands. When pushed all the way down, it becomes apparent when it's fully seated, just like this. Notice where all the hair and dirt collects around the wheels. So I take my vacuum cleaner to clean out those areas now, while I wait on the nozzle soaking in the vinegar. At this point, I'm able to pull in vinegar through the nozzle like a straw, just make sure I don't drink any of it, because that would be nasty. I could test it against a paper towel at certain intervals to make sure that there's no more obstruction in the nozzle. With vinegar in the nozzle, I could simply blow it out through the hose and check the spray pattern in this paper towel. We could see there's no further obstruction in here. The nozzles are then washed out with clean water. With the vinegar gone, I then reinsert the screw back into the nozzle. This is the one that's permanently affixed. Noting the position of this plastic piece threads on the left side, it places in these two holes just like that. It just kind of floats there. Then we carefully run the hose with the nozzle through. That piece may fall out, that's just fine. And we get that nozzle up to that post where the screw goes into. Remove it if we have to, like I am. Put that one peg through on one side, match up the screw to the other, and seat everything together. Put it back in position. The screw kind of sticks out a bit, and now we're ready to screw down that screw. And now we'll gently tighten down that screw, remembering that we're screwing into plastic. And this piece is on there. It just kind of floats here and points down and to the right a bit. It's perfectly normal. The orange hose is then reconnected onto the top of the pump. And the center of the hose is secured in this groove here. Taking a minute to check and make sure that none of the sensors around the unit have fallen out, so I'm going around the entire perimeter, also on this side, up front here, also as well. Also that this plastic piece is correctly seated. We can see that there are a couple of notches that it falls down into. So I'm going to place it back down, and I can feel when it's seated correctly. There's a lip up front, so this side pivots in first. Down and forward, and then we lay the entire unit over, working this seal in as we lay it down, because that's going to obstruct everything. So we just kind of turn it around in circles till that gasket is all the way around this top part of the case as we lower everything down. So exert pressure and then try and get the seal out of there. I turn it to the side to work on it from the side. And there it is. Eventually comes up. I make sure it's fully seated. Just give it a wiggle. And it's good. We're done. And close the lid. Again, we have 2 sizes of screws. I'll call them out as needed. 2 of the longest screws will go in these 2 holes, so I screwed them in now. This cover can now be placed back on. And it'll be held on with the 5 short screws. At this point, the only screws that'll be left are the long screws. Test this little button here, make sure it's not binding. So now these 2 center screws between the wheels will go in. Followed by these 3 in the back center. And then these 2 outer rear screws. The unit is then flipped back over. Check that everything's seated properly, that the lid opens, that wiggles, that all the buttons click good. Now we have these 4 half circle holders that'll fit the cutouts for the front bumper and the nozzle, of course. So I'm going to lay the bumper in and do it in such a way that I drop them right down on those 4 circles and look that the nozzle is aligned, which it is because it kind of floats. Then I'll close the lid and flip the entire unit over, remembering that that bumper's not yet screwed in. So I'll screw those 4 screws in. Remember just snugging it down because it's plastic and there's no reason to break any of this. And I just happen to notice that my wheels are getting a bit old, so when I replace these wheels, I will make another video for this, link posted on the top right corner. I'll be sure to add the mop attachment back on, and I stress that because you want an attachment that's going to use the sprayer in testing. Flip it back over. Here's that membrane filter that was cleaned and decalcified and tested that it actually flows water, so I open the lid and I place that filter down in the center here. Close the lid. And lastly, the battery, which I drop back in, and with a slightly larger Phillips screwdriver, I secure it with those 2 Phillips screws, completing the task. Turn it back over, open up the lid, and reintroduce the bottle with the cleaning solution. Close the lid, and we're done. Let's test it. And I expect, obviously, since we blew out all the hoses, it's going to take several sprays before it starts working. That is going to be no surprise at all. So that was nothing. Nothing again. Maybe 3rd time's a charm. And on the 3rd time, we could see it just started working, but it's also still got to purge some air, so it's got to run a couple more times before it really gets going. And a little bit later, eventually, we see the improved pattern. So I hope you found this video on the repair of the Braava Jet nozzle informative, entertaining, and enjoyable. Do me a favor, hit that like button down below, helps me out a lot when you do. And hit that subscribe button for more videos like this when they come out. When another video comes out in the series, a link will be posted in the top right corner. Again, I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching. Would you like to reply?